The Living World, Evolution of Biodiversity. This unit describes biodiversity of Earth and how it came to be and how environmental factors can cause and influence its decline. So biodiversity can be described as at a genetic level, at a species level, and then at an ecosystem level. The living world and biodiversity, the evolution of niches and species distributions. Because evolution alters the traits that species express, and because different traits perform well in some environments but not in others, the evolution of species affects where species are able to live on Earth or not. And as environments have changed over millions of years, species have responded by alternating how they are distributed. So this response also suggests that the environmental changes in the future will continue to affect the distribution of all species. And some species that can move easily and quickly will likely continue to live, whereas species that cannot adjust and they cannot move will go extinct. So by the end of this, you should be able to explain the difference between a fundamental and a realized niche. Also be able to describe how environmental change has occurred and can alter species distributions, and also discuss how environmental changes can affect and cause species to go extinct. Every species has an optimal environment in which it performs very well. All species have a range of tolerance or limits to abiotic conditions that can tolerate, like extreme temperatures or humidity, salinity, pH. All of this illustrates a concept of environmental factors where a species can live. So they all have a range of tolerance, and all species have a fundamental niche, which is the suit of abiotic conditions where they can survive and reproduce at their best. A realized niche is a range of abiotic and biotic conditions where you are likely to find a species actually there, and its distribution is the areas of the world or specific areas in which it can actually live. So this figure illustrates the concept of using one environmental factor like temperature. So as conditions move farther away from ideal, the individuals may be able to survive and then perhaps even grow, but they're not able to reproduce. So as conditions continue to move farther and farther away from the ideal, the individuals can only just survive. If conditions move beyond the range of tolerance, then individuals will die. So because the combination of abiotic conditions in a particular environment fundamentally determine whether a species can persist there, the suit of abiotic conditions under which a species can survive, grow, and reproduce is what we call its fundamental niche. All right, there's the diagram I was talking about. Range of tolerance. Every species has an optimal environment. And so if you're looking at temperature versus how well it can perform, it is a bell-shaped curve. A species that can live under a wide range of conditions, both abiotic and biotic, is called a generalist. And a species that is very specialized to live in a very specific habitat and to feed on a very small group of things is what we call a specialist. Niche specialists do well when environmental conditions remain relatively constant. However, loss of any favorite food or source of habitat with very few alternatives decrease its chance for survival. Because species are adapted to a particular environmental conditions, we would expect that changes in environmental conditions would alter their distribution. In this illustration, it shows the changes of tree species distribution over a period of time. So this was from pollen that was recovered in lake sediments in the muddy bottoms of lakes. It indicated that plant species moved north as temperatures warmed following the retreat of glaciers. So beginning about 12,000 years ago, the retreat of these glaciers started to happen. And so the areas shown in color or in white were sampled for pollen. The areas shown in gray were not sampled. This displays the pollen records for 3 tree species of North America. These pollen records suggest that changes in climate conditions after the Ice Age and the glacial retreats produce substantial changes in the distribution of these tree plants over time. They were pine trees, spruce trees, and also a birch. All moved north with the retreat of the glaciers, and as the plants moved north, animals followed. Because the past changes of environmental conditions have led to changes in how these species are distributed, it's reasonable to assume that future changes can also cause species to become distributed differently. So the biggest example that we're all thinking of is global climate change. So as the global climate warms, some areas of the world are expected to receive less precipitation, and other areas are predicted to receive more. So if our predictions of our future environmental changes are correct, and if we have a good understanding of how niche requirements work, we should be able to predict how the distribution of species will change over time. North American trees, for example, are expected to have more northerly distributions in the future as global temperatures increase. So in other words, the loblolly pine is expected to move from our area, our southern area, and then be distributed north. This diagram shows the loblolly pine and how it's expected to be distributed differently by the year 2100. Species vary in their ability to move across any sort of landscape. So as environmental change occurs, and some species are highly mobile at specific times in their life stages, then they're going to be redistributed. So other organisms like tortoises and stuff may not make it at all. But birds move, they take with them loblolly pine seeds, and so they're getting a distribution. So even though trees don't physically move themselves, there is a stage in their life cycle, their seed stage, that's highly mobile. Environmental change can cause species to go extinct. So if the conditions change and species that they cannot adapt to this change or move to other favorable conditions, they'll go extinct. The average lifespan of a species appears to be about 1 million years, give or take, up to like 10 million. And 99% of species that have ever even lived on the planet are now gone. A mass extinction is when a large amount of species go extinct in a relatively short period of time. There has been 5 global mass extinction events on record. And if you're looking at the diagram, genera, meaning like gene of species, as these extinction events happen, there's a great increase in the number of phyla and genera that we find on the planet. And this takes millions of years, okay? If you're looking at the diagram, we're talking about millions of years ago, 0 being right here, being present time. The greatest mass extinction event on record took place about 251 million years ago, and about 90% of all the marine species and 70% of all the land vertebrates went extinct. This cause of this mass extinction is not known, but a better known mass extinction occurred at the end of the Cretaceous period. That's like 65 million years ago. That probably sounds a little more familiar to you. And that's roughly about half of all the species living on Earth, including the dinosaurs, of course. They went extinct. And this cause of this mass extinction is a subject of sore debate, but there is now a consensus amongst scientists that a meteor struck Earth, produced a dust cloud that circled the planet, and blocked incoming solar radiation. And as a result of this being blocked, photosynthesis had halted, and therefore the lack of food at the producer level basically changed how many species could live and survive on. So among the few species that actually survived was this very small squirrel-sized primate. That is what we consider and what we now know is the ancestor of humans. Many scientists view extinctions as an ultimate result of a change in the environment. So environmental scientists can learn a lot about the potential effects of both large and small environmental changes by studying these historical environmental extinctions. Scientists are now collecting data and producing what we call hotspots. These are priority areas where conservation is at an all-time high, and where we want to conserve the biodiversity in those areas. Biodiversity hotspots are identified by 3 criteria. If we're talking about just birds, for example, we're using the total number of species, the number of endemic species, and then the number of threatened species. So these factors combined rank birds for who's the most endangered, and then where are our hotspots. During the last 2 decades, scientists have reached a consensus that we are currently experiencing a 6th global mass extinction event of a magnitude within the range of the previous 5 mass extinctions. So estimates of extinction rates, they vary widely, but they range anywhere from 2% to as many as 25% of species going extinct by 2020. However, in contrast to some previous mass extinctions, there's an argument amongst scientists that the current mass extinction event that we are going into, if it's caused by humans or not. So a wide range of causes that humans can do, like habitat destruction or overharvest, introducing these invasive species, of course climate change and disease, is all up for debate. However, we will examine some of these factors later because much of the current environmental change caused by human activities is both it's dramatic and it's sudden. Environmental scientists contend that many species may not be able to move and adapt to avoid extinction as our global climate is changing. So the recovery of biodiversity that happened from earlier mass extinctions took about 10 million years. And so we think that the human perspective on this is that recovery from the present mass extinction event that's going on will take 500,000 human generations to recover from. So much of this debate is from environmental scientists, and then of course from government officials, and so on. The true magnitude of this crisis is the cost of basically how it's going to impact humans. That's for later topics.